afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Patty Otasic. I'm from the College of Graduate Studies. I manage the Graduate Student Resource Center. The Resource Center is responsible for programming for graduate students to build community and to help you with professional development. This is a three-part career series, career leadership development. It's the final in the three-part series, so we're happy to see some familiar faces return again. We will be also, so that you know, we're going to be recording this. We'll be recording this, so you will find copies of this online. You can find it at the Graduate Student Resource Center website. They should be available in about 3 weeks. So that you know, our group here today is going to be talking to you about building your CV and your cover letter. We have a great panel of experts here, and we're excited about having them share their information with you. The format of today will be pretty simple. We hope to have you out of here by about 5:30, no later than 5:35, so we'll be mindful of time. I'll do brief introductions, and then each of our panelists will speak with you for about 15 minutes about their area of expertise and their point of view in terms of building your own CV. Then we'll hope to have some time at the very end to leave time for any questions that you might have. So I will go ahead and get started. Any questions? Any concerns before we start? All right, thank you. So to my right is Mrs. Karen Leesky. Karen Leesky grew up in Hamilton, Ohio. She's a first-generation college student in her family, and she earned her bachelor's in political science and a master's in public administration from the University of Cincinnati. She also earned a postgraduate certificate in education at Cleveland State University. Karen previously served as an executive director of a nonprofit for Housing Corporation and set up programs in leadership and development at Cleveland State University. She's a member of her community's city council. She served on her community's board of education for 12 years. Her passion is education. She's worked with students in suburban and Cleveland schools, as well as prison inmates and college students. Karen has been involved in career counseling and career development. She's served as career coordinator at Cleveland State University's Career Success Network, working specifically with students in the areas of business, education, and science. Currently, she's the CSU Senior Manager for Talent Development. She's conducted numerous workshops on resume writing, interviewing, and network. Also, Karen's a certified etiquette trainer. Welcome to the panel, Karen.
Thank you, Patty.
Next, we have Dr. Dan Simon. Dan Simon received his bachelor's degree from SUNY Arizona State University and a master's degree from the University of Washington, a PhD from Syracuse University, all in electrical engineering. He's worked for 6 different engineering companies over a period of 13 years and spent a year working as an independent full-time consultant. He's been a professor at CSU for 16 years and is also an associate editor for 3 engineering journals. Dr. Simon's research has been funded by NASA, also by the Cleveland Clinic and the National Science Foundation, along with several other companies. He's written over 100 journal and conference papers and is author of 2 graduate-level textbooks. He teaches several subjects at CSU, including technical writing for undergraduates, master's, and doctoral students. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Simon. Next, we have Dr. Christine Still. Dr. Still is an associate professor of early literacy in the Department of Teacher Education at Cleveland State University. She's coordinator for the Literacy Education Program, and she's the founding faculty advisor for the CSU chapter of International Reading Association. Dr. Still also served as co-director for the Community Learning Center for Children and Youth. Previously, she served as director of Cleveland Schools Book Fund, which created classroom libraries in all K-3 classrooms in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Dr. Still is also active in CSU's Campus International School. Her research focuses on the integration of meaningful technology-based literacy events in primary grade classrooms and on literacy instruction and teacher professional development. She has presented at over 50 professional conferences and is author or co-author of more than 35 scholarly writings. Prior to joining the faculty at Cleveland State University in 2006, Dr. Still taught first grade for 10 years and also held the position of visiting assistant professor at the University of Akron while she was completing her doctoral studies. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Still. And finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Crystal Wayman. Dr. Wayman is professor and chair of the Biological, Geological, and Environmental Sciences at Cleveland State. She received her Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry, summa cum laude, from Mansfield University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD in biochemistry from Purdue University. She then completed fellowships in molecular biology and cell biology at the Cleveland Clinic before joining Cleveland State in 1998. Dr. Wayman received her first NIH grant in 2000, and in total, she's been awarded more than $2 million in external funding. In 2007, Dr. Wayman was recognized with the College of Sciences Outstanding Teacher Award. In 2009, she won the University Distinguished Faculty Research Award, and in 2013, she was recognized as the McNair Faculty Mentor of the Year. She's mentored 10 doctoral students and more than 25 master's and undergraduate students in her laboratory. She's also served on 69 dissertation committees and 31 master's committees. Dr. Wayman has been a study section member for the American Heart Association and has served as CSU founding director for the Center of Gene Regulation in Health and Disease, and she's been the interim dean of the College of Graduate Studies. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Wayman. We'll now begin with Karen Leesky in her presentation, and bear with us, we'll be sharing the computer here where we're using some new technology today, so we'll hope that it goes our way.
Thank you, Patty. Welcome, everyone. I know it's late in the day. You probably have had a busy day. You might be looking at class this evening. If you feel like you need to get up and stretch or stand alongside of the room, if you feel that it's just been that long of a day to sit longer, feel free during my presentation. So I am pleased to be first because I feel like my colleagues today have such specialized areas of expertise and have the academic aspect of the curriculum vitae, whereas if I were to be giving you advice as to how to go forward with a vita, it might be if you were applying for a position to direct some kind of an operation or organization at a university and they might request a curriculum vitae. So what you want to think about, they're used in lieu of resumes for many positions. And did you all receive copies of the slides? Okay. And they provide a more comprehensive look at your academic and work history than a resume. So with your resume, you want to really tailor that to be significantly shorter than a curriculum vitae. The curriculum vitae would be much more comprehensive. And there is no set format for a curriculum vitae if you start to do some research, but don't make the mistake and find a template for one that you think looks absolutely perfect, because if you try to use a template for a resume or a curriculum vitae or a cover letter, it will look absolutely terrible. The spacing and font will be off. So when you see a format that you like, follow the format, but don't fill it in as a template. And you want to also maybe talk to some of your professors in your subject area if you're going to be applying for an academic type position, because they might be able to share with you what some have looked like. Maybe they've been on some search committees recently and seen some outstanding curriculum vitae. So use your professors as resources as well. You also want to think about what they're looking for this position, and pay close attention to how the position is described. Do your research on the place, the university, or the organization, so you understand the company culture, the organization culture, and what kinds of things you might want to emphasize. You don't want to use the same curriculum vitae for every position that you apply for, because you might want to emphasize different things for each one. So if you were applying for a position that required significant research experience, you wouldn't want your research to be the last thing that they would see on your vita. So just looking at, there's some really good information on this one website, jobsearch.about.com, in terms of overviews for resume information and curriculum vitae. So for your contact information, of course, your name and address, Things that are really important, anytime you give a professional voicemail, you have that with your phone. Don't have the voicemail go to your office phone number unless they have encouraged you to be seeking this position. It would be viewed as unprofessional. And make sure that you repeat back either your name or your phone number. It sounds really insignificant, but it's huge. It's the first thing if someone's trying to reach you that indicates how professional you are. Also, a professional email address. It would be okay to use your CSU email if you're a student here, but if you're also working someplace, don't use your work email address if you're seeking a position. Don't use anything with nicknames. You want it to be very clear. And also, any information if you needed to share a current job title or anything about your rank. Do not include social security numbers, marital status, birth dates, age, height, weight, any other personal information, number of children. Don't include a photo. Some cultures include photos on resumes and professional vita, but you want to leave your photo in the photo album and don't put it on your documents. For your education, of course, you would put things in reverse chronological order, beginning with the highest degree that you have attained or that you're seeking. Include all the institutions you've attended, any degrees that you attained previously, and the dates. And if you're currently a graduate student, you could indicate expected graduation date. You would also want to include information for your dissertation and thesis, and these could all be headings on your vita as you go through. Your research agenda could be really important if this is a research position, so that would include brief statements about your research agenda, and you also would want to include a little bit more information about your research projects, possibly some of your findings, and in some cases it's helpful to include the people with whom you've worked and the faculty members. Publications are something that you also want to include. So if you have any journal articles or you have presented any poster sessions or presented papers at conferences, those are all, if any of those have been published in any type of proceeding, you would list those. You would also possibly divide things by subtopics. That might not be as relevant for someone just finishing their education as maybe someone who had been in the academic arena longer. You want to include presentations. This would not necessarily mean every time you maybe gave a presentation to a class, but it would be presentations to groups or at conferences, things along those lines. If it were relevant, sometimes you might include non-academic presentations, but you want to really focus on things that are professionally relevant if you were to do a resume by chance or a curriculum vitae. For your experience, you might think that some of the other experiences that you've had that maybe haven't been academic related might not matter. You would at least want to list some of those because so many of our students have had such a broad range of work experiences, and if you've had some other types of positions that maybe weren't as a visiting professor or a lecturer or an instructor, maybe you worked as a server or in retail after high school. Even if you just put those in a section at the bottom of your curriculum vitae for other types of work experience, that shows that you have outstanding communication skills usually, and that you've worked with people from diverse backgrounds. So often I talk to students and they say, oh, I don't have any relevant experience. But when you start thinking in terms of transferable skills and how some of these skills you've developed through some of these other types of experiences you've had, they can really help to set you apart sometimes in the job application process. So in terms of experience, if you have done some teaching, that could be a subsection. And I know sometimes students just list course numbers, but those numbers might not mean that much to someone reviewing this. It's always helpful to include the course titles if you've done some teaching. And I know I've worked with students who sometimes have had teaching assistantships working in labs. You could indicate the course that you were the teaching assistant for, or if you've had a research type experience, say at Cleveland Clinic while you've been a student, you could indicate that in a different section. So you could have other possible headings, and this is all about thinking about how to capture you as the best candidate, what kinds of things set you apart from all of the other candidates. It doesn't matter in that case if it's a resume or a CV, but think about what it is about you and the different experiences in your education. It could also include some type of license or professional certificate. Sometimes students have gained additional expertise with some types of software or computer type certificates to show they have expertise in certain things, and this might be outside the area that you've studied, but those kinds of things can sometimes be beneficial to include. Professional development activities, if you haven't been involved in any professional networking or been involved with any professional associations, these are good things with which to get involved. It can help you begin to establish more of a professional network, and those people might know of some opportunities as you go forward. So it can also show leadership as a graduate student, but it can really be helpful as you go forward. If you've been involved in pursuing any grants or other types of funding, you would want to have a heading for that, include the details about the project and the amounts. And even as a student, sometimes I've seen students who have received small research grants. Don't think just because it might be $1,500 or $2,500 it's insignificant. It shows you put forth the initiative and the effort, and it might help to show that you have an interest in pursuing this down the road in other ways in your career. Any types of honors and awards, these are things that should be professionally related. It doesn't mean that you were the best speller in 8th grade or you were on your high school soccer team or something along those lines, but it should really be things connected with your education or professional career. So if you received some kind of award as an outstanding student in some type of a class, if any type of notation were made like that, or if you received some type of a scholarship, don't just list the name of the scholarship. People outside of the area that awarded it might not always know what that was, but maybe it paid for half of your tuition, or it might have been a significant amount of money. So think in terms of somebody who isn't familiar with these honors and awards. You might want to include some kind of a brief description as to what those are. In terms of service, we talked a little bit about professional development. If you've been involved in anything in a leadership capacity, or if you were appointed or elected to serve on some type of a board at a local, state, or national level, that's important. I know recently there were a couple of students who went with Sandra English to an engineering conference, and they were awarded a travel grant, and it was a national conference. So think in terms of all of the different types of things that you have done that maybe you haven't thought to put down on a resume or a curriculum vitae. Leadership is huge, especially if you think in terms of some of the more technical types of degrees that graduate students pursue, because leadership, if you've been elected to an office, shows communication skills. And this is something that we hear from employers for all kinds of positions, that the candidates coming forth that have what they call the soft skills, the communication skills, have a much stronger chance of getting hired. It's the eye contact, the handshake, and being able to talk to different groups of people And if you have served in some type of a leadership position, you have really shown that you've been developing those skills. So in terms of skills and qualifications, even if you aren't a computer science major, look at the job posting for the position you're seeking. I know when I've been on some of the search committees here, they've been for professional positions, but we look at all of the minimum and preferred qualifications. And so when we're reviewing all of the candidates, there's an Excel spreadsheet. So just imagine this, if you're putting together a resume or a curriculum vitae, have the job posting on the left of your computer screen or on a piece of paper, have what you're writing on the right, and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to make sure that you've made it very clear that you meet the minimum and hopefully all of the preferred, and show as much experience as you can in terms of the preferred, because that will show that you're a stronger candidate. You don't want to assume if a job posting for someone in pursuing a graduate degree in history, if it has something about computer skills and you're thinking, well, I just had to complete my master's program, of course I know how to use a computer. They're not going to assume that. So if it's on a job posting for any type of a position, make it very clear and go back and forth, and try to show as much experience as possible. So then the next part is cover letters. Once again, if you follow these handouts with these slides, you'll have everything. Make sure you're very specific with the contact information. Don't address a letter to Dear Sir or Madam if there isn't any name. You would want to say Dear Hiring Committee, Dear Search Committee. You want to make it clear why you're writing and try to show some passion and enthusiasm why you're so enthused about this position. It will capture the interest of the person reviewing it, and if there's any type of a mutual contact, if someone suggested you apply, you would include that. You also want to think about what you have to offer. Don't put down what this institution can do for you, but what you can do for them, and show connections between what you have to offer and what they're looking for. Then in the final paragraph, you thank the employer. Here's a sample format to follow on these next slides. If you follow this, you'll have a very professional cover letter, and that can be a way to highlight some additional experiences. I can't emphasize enough the importance of proofreading. I see so many people applying for positions in our office, so many students applying for even on-campus positions, and there are so many mistakes in what is sent, and the spelling and the grammar, incorrect words. It just gets put to the bottom. So make sure that you have an extra couple sets of eyes. So this is our contact information, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think I did 15 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay. Oops.
Do you want to should we just rotate seats? Would that be the best? And then it,
It's working. Okay. The room has some technical issues, so we're using some new equipment that just came in. So thanks for your patience with us.
Okay, so is mine on here somewhere?
It's on the desktop. It's on the desktop.
Oh,
To the right of your name.
oh. Simon is probably me.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then you know how to maximize it
Yeah, I think so.
on the bottom right.
Here somewhere.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. Okay, hello everybody. How are you guys doing? So I'm going to talk about writing a good resume, and like Patty said in the intro, I've worked for about half a dozen different engineering companies before I started at CSU here. So I've written lots of resumes and got lots of interviews, and I've also read lots of resumes and interviewed lots of people here at CSU, hiring students and faculty. So I'm going to speak from my experience base and tell you what I think about good resumes. So first of all, I found it interesting that the National Association of Colleges and Employers, this is back in 2009, but I think it's still pretty much up to date, they came out with results based on surveys of companies of what are the attributes or the characteristics of the perfect job candidate. So what do you think would be on the list of the perfect job candidate? Well, here are the top things. A good GPA. So, you know, I tell students a lot of times, if you can take fewer courses, you know, take an extra semester or two to graduate, that'll be worth it if you can keep your GPA up, you know. Good communication skills, a strong work ethic, ability to work with a team, initiative, leadership, experience, and relevant work experience. And students really like that last one, right, when you're looking for your first job. And everybody wants work experience, right? But that's the perfect job candidate. So when you're putting your resume together, the question is, how can you communicate on your resume or CV that you have these attributes? So if you have these slides available to you and you're putting your resume together, think about how you can communicate these attributes on your resume, all right? Maybe you can't communicate good GPA very easily on your resume, depending on your situation. So that's okay, you can leave off the GPA. Leave that off if you have to. How can you communicate things like good communication skills, strong work ethic? So if you volunteered for something, if you went the extra mile in some responsibility or some position that you had, you can communicate that. You can mention that in your resume, right? If you have leadership experience, that's great. Did you lead your senior design team? Did you have a leadership position in a campus group? Anything like that. That's what employers are looking for. All right, so for resumes, more specifically, keep it short. All right, in this case, less is more. So if you can get everything on one page, that's good. That would be great. You can use 2 pages if you have a lot of work experience. And I say here the details will come out in the interview. So I think a lot of students try to get the job with the resume. But you're not going to get the job with your resume. No one ever hired anybody on the basis of their resume, right? The only thing that your resume will get you is an interview. So that's what you're trying to do with your resume. You're not trying to get the job, you're trying to get the interview. So you just need to include the keywords and communicate those attributes that I had on the previous slide. Communicate your main skills and experiences. I know that you did all of these, you know, great projects in every class, and you want to list all the projects that you did and everything that you've accomplished. But that dilutes your resume if you try to put too much on there. So you need to keep it short and stay focused. And remember that recruiters or whoever's hiring, they might take only a few seconds to look at your resume. I just went through a search. I'm kind of in the middle of it now. We're hiring faculty candidates. We got over 100 resumes, you know. These resumes, they're like dozens of pages, some of these, you know. So, you know, you have to really take everything that's important and condense it down so that you can catch the attention of whoever's reading it, so that then they'll, you know, look at it more carefully, review it more carefully. Visual appeal is extremely important, I think, on resumes. Make sure everything is laid out perfectly, that you have some white space, that it's organized well, you don't have any grammar errors or typos or anything like that. Like the previous speaker emphasized, I think that's really important. Make sure that you've proofread it. It has to be perfect. It has to be perfect, because if you send out a resume and it's got typos, or the alignment is like not consistent, or the font is kind of weird looking and it's not consistent, then the employer is going to say, well, you know, here they're trying to impress me to get the job, and they can't even get it right. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen after they get the job and they've got job security here? And they're going to really be lazy, right? So no, you've got to make sure everything is really perfect on your resume. No typos or anything like that. So here's my resume. What's wrong with this resume? Okay, lots of people are saying different things because there's lots of things wrong with the resume, right? Yeah, there's several things wrong with it. There's not enough white space. Like everything is kind of crammed together. You know, it's like makes you tired just to think about reading all that stuff. It's not attractive. It's not like visually appealing. The same font everywhere. There's no strategic use of indentation. The career goal is not listed. Put a question mark there, because I know a lot of resume advisors or experts say that career goals now are obsolete and you shouldn't include career goals anymore. But I think career goals are still nice to have as the first topic in your resume. It's like a 1 or 2 line summary of what you're looking for. Skills are not listed, and there's not enough contact information. It's just my address up there. If anybody wants to send me a Christmas card, that's my address. But an interviewer, an employer is probably not going to send you a letter to your postal address, right? So here's a much better resume. There's white space, a little bit of bold font, and some bullets, and kind of nice alignment and indentation. You can see how much more nice, how much more attractive this is for the reader. I think you can see that. Okay, so that's not my real career goal. It's just an example. Okay, this is a bad page break in the middle of a paragraph. So if you do have to use more than one page, make sure the page break is thought out well, so that you don't have a page break right in the middle of a paragraph. And the last paragraph here is too long. Here I'm trying to include everything that I did during this job, because I'm proud of so many things that I accomplished. But again, you just have to stick with the highlights and stick with the basics when you're putting your resume together. Okay, so this is the nicer page break between paragraphs. I have the one paragraph, then I have the next paragraph, and there's a page break in between there. And there's footer information on the multi-page resume, so with my name and the date. I always like to put the date on a resume, because I appreciate it when I go to my resume file on my computer and I'm looking to hire somebody for something, and I look at a resume and I wonder, when did I get this resume? How up to date is it? So footer information. This is something else that the previous speaker emphasized. Don't emphasize what your employer can do. Don't emphasize what you're looking for from the job. Emphasize what you can do for your employer. So this applies both to your resume and to any cover letter that you send. So for instance, maybe somebody lists their career goal, seeking position with flexible hours, where I can use my creative circuit design skills. Okay, is this a good career goal? No, this is not a good career goal. Nobody wants to hire you if you're looking for flexible hours. Of course, everybody wants flexible hours. That goes without saying, right? And where I can use my creative circuit design skills. Again, you're asking the employer to give you the opportunity to do something, so that's no good. Here's another one. Seeking challenging circuit design position with future management opportunities. How does that come across? That comes across as whatever job you get, you're going to be looking for another job right away. right? A management job. Okay, maybe you are looking for future management opportunities, but you can't say that right, up front like this. Okay, so this is kind of mixed up a little. That's okay. Here's another one, seeking a position where I can use circuit design skills to solve challenging analog problems. How does that come across? That comes across as much better because what's your goal here? Your goal is to solve problems. Your goal is not to find a good job for yourself. Your goal is to solve your employer's problems. Your whole goal in life is to help your employer. That's what you're getting across here. Okay? Let's see where we get. Oh, there's one more. Seeking a position where I can solve challenging analog problems in a team environment. That's also really good. Anytime you can mention teamwork, it's a plus because everybody's so interested in hiring people who can work together on teams and also who can lead teams. So that's what I want to emphasize here, is to emphasize what you can do for your employer. Okay, how much is this? Oh, there we go. Okay, you want to include keywords also that can be scanned. And that's kind of in juxtaposition with my next point, which is to avoid abbreviations and undefined acronyms. Because you see on the keywords that can be scanned is something like FPGA as an example. Well, that's an acronym and it's undefined, but if someone's in that field and the employer is looking for someone in that field, then you wouldn't really have to define the acronym. So you have to realize with a lot of these job positions that are popping up, and employers are getting resumes, they just scan the resume and they don't even necessarily have to read it. They just scan it, and then they have scanning software that actually looks for keywords. And any resume that happens to have FPGA keyword in it, they'll forward that to, the FPGA division or whatever. So include these hot keywords, and it also goes back to what the previous speaker mentioned about customizing and tailoring your resume for the position that you're applying for, which I really like also. The position is here, and you're typing your resume right here. So I know some people might think, well, that's kind of a pain. I'm going to apply for maybe dozens of jobs, when I graduate. But if you can, if they want to interview you, you'll be glad to spend 5 minutes with them on the phone. So if you can invest 5 minutes ahead of time to tailor a little bit, that'll be really helpful for you. But if there's undefined acronyms, that doesn't come across as very well. So use keywords, but don't use undefined acronyms. Another thing that I'm reinforcing, don't include any personal information, but some of your outside activities could be relevant. If they include leadership, or if they include things that are going to impress the employer with your leadership skills or your teamwork skills and things like that. Don't provide any reference information. Some people might disagree with me on this one, but I view reference information as a waste of space. Some people on their resumes say references will be provided on request. That's also a waste of space, because what else would you say? References will not be provided on request? No. Of course you're going to provide references on request. So you don't have to say anything about reference information. When you provide reference information, make sure and get your references, or your reference letter, the person's permission first. So once in a while, I'll get a reference request. Somebody will email me or phone call, and they'll say, so-and-so is looking for a job, and they've listed you as a reference. And I have to say something like, well, I have no idea who that is. I don't remember. Maybe he had a course with me a few years ago. Or, oh yeah, I remember him. He cheated on his final exam, or whatever it is. So make sure and check with your reference. Don't ask for a reference from someone who's going to give you a bad reference, right? Give the opportunity to the person you're asking to gracefully decline. Because if somebody asks me for a reference and I can't give them a good reference for whatever reason, I'll say, you really should ask for someone's reference who you've worked more closely with and who's more familiar with your work. Okay, you don't want to just get reference letters from anybody who's willing to give you a reference letter. You want to get reference letters from people who can give you a strong reference letter. You can even ask your professor or whoever, if I submit your name as a reference, could you provide a strong reference letter for me? If someone asks, ask them that, and they'll appreciate the opportunity to gracefully decline if they need to. So those are some of my tips on resume writing. I hope that they are very successful for you.
Thank you, Dr.
Oh, are we okay to just
Yeah.
keep moving this?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just, I think yours is below.
Because I'm a Mac person, so. I'm not
Yeah,
a Mac,
I think
and
yours
it's
is just
stressful for me, but I'll
there,
show you.
but I can get it.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I can, yeah, so, okay, all right. I'm not sure what this is. Okay, well, I'm going to give you the educator perspective of creating professional vitas and cover letters. And when Patty had asked me to, when Dr. Schulteis and Patty had asked me to engage in this panel discussion, for me, and I'll talk a little bit more about this a little later in the talk, the timing was actually very perfect because I've actually been going through a 6-week process of an internal search within my college, and I've been a candidate for a position. So I had, the opportunity to really fine-tune my own vita and write a very specified cover letter, which I'll share some of those details with you. So one of the items that Patty had asked us to reflect on was our own experiences with either creating resumes or vitas. And I just wanted to go through some of the transitions of my own career. From 1993 to 2003, I was a first grade teacher. And so coming out of the University of Akron as a newly minted teacher, my resume was very brief. It was very focused to securing a teacher as a position as an elementary teacher. And I didn't really have a whole lot of experience. I think I posted, a couple summer jobs that I had. And then I had more specific child-related experience as working with child daycare centers in the summer, running summer camps and those types of things. So I really didn't have a lot of professional experiences, but the ones that I did have, I really wanted to highlight those experiences as they related to my securing a job working with children. So my first resume was very brief, 1 page, basically just listing my education, my professional experiences to date, which were very limited. And then as I worked as a teacher, of course, that began to grow. And in 2003, I worked at the University of Akron as a visiting assistant professor. And that's really, I guess, my first introduction to what a curriculum vitae was. And as a visiting professor at the time, I had to still go up for annual review. And so that was my first exposure to putting together a curriculum vitae, which highlighted some very introductory presentations that I had made at local workshops and conferences, as well as my experience as a graduate student at the time. And then since 2006, I've been at Cleveland State, and from 2006 to 2012, I was an assistant professor. So certainly for the job search to come to Cleveland State, I had to really work hard at expanding all of my initial attempts at putting this vita together. And so it just has continued to grow since 2003, 2004 to what it is today in 2015. Certainly as an associate professor, we every year we have to put together, and all of the committee members can attest to this, we have to put together a faculty annual activity report, which requires us to constantly revisit and update our vita. And so I think one of the messages here that I wanted to portray to you was that anytime you engage in some type of scholarly or professional activity, I would just automatically add it to your ongoing vita or resume file, because sometimes if we don't consistently add those items in as they're happening, it's very easily to forget, and then you're having to go back through emails and invitations and other sources of ways that you can capture what you've done. So I think it's really important to keep
continuing to add to it as the activities are happening. So again, as in our current role, it's constantly updating and continuing to work on that. And so those are on this slide, these are the items that I just talked to you about. The resume as a first grade teacher, the visiting assistant professor, and then just continuing to search out opportunities and make sure that your VITA is up to date as well. One thing that I wanted to mention, and I think both speakers before me have touched on this, but is the difference between a resume versus a VITA. A resume is more of a marketing tool, and as Dan had mentioned, it should be very brief, one page, and it really is summarizing your education, your experiences, and it's really not intended to be exhaustive. The curriculum vitae contains the same elements as the resume, but it certainly provides more details of your background and experiences, and it can be anywhere from 2 or 3+ pages. I know many of us in the academic world, our resumes are anywhere between 15 and 20 pages plus. I mean, just as you continue to add experiences, presentations, grant activities, service activities, it just continues to be a living and growing document as well. As far as the origin of what curriculum vitae means, in Latin, vita means course of life, and so it's really defined as an account of a person's education, their qualifications, their experiences, and it's typically sent with a job application. Some of you might be wondering, well, when is it appropriate to use a CV as opposed to a resume? In the US, a CV is typically used for academic or research-related job searches. For most others, a resume is appropriate. And in Europe, Asia, Africa, a CV is actually standard protocol for most job searches. So I think in our country, you know, if you're entering into the academic world, then a CV is appropriate. If you're going into business or other fields, a resume is probably more likely what you'll tailor your job search application documents to. So you're probably thinking, well, if I had a CV or a resume, how would I convert one to the other? As far as both types of documents, you have to identify the specific. And a lot of it requires, as we said, research and preparation, researching the job that you're applying for and taking the time to really prepare these types of documents. You need to identify and really have a very clear idea of what skills and qualities and qualifications the employer is looking for. The resume will focus very articulately in on those skills, and the CV will remain more broad and holistic. And if you're actually applying with a CV, the cover letter is where you can really get to the nitty-gritty of those specifics that the job search is calling for. Certainly, you would need to convert the length of each document to the appropriate format. As we said, a resume is typically 1 page, a CV is 3 or more pages. In my kind of review of the elements that you should continue to include in a CV, I found 10 things that I think are important to include in your curriculum vitae, which are obviously your contact details. You need to know, your employer has to know, your potential employer has to know how to get in touch with you. And as Dan said, you know, just limiting it to a mailing address is not really the world that we live in. So making sure that you have a mobile phone, an email address that they can contact you and get a pretty quick response from you. Certainly you'd want to include your employment history if you have any, your education, your qualifications, skills that you see in yourself and strengths. You know, there are ways to include your personality, but I think, you know, it should be very professional. As the first speaker said, you know, you wouldn't want to obviously be putting your picture on the top of your resume, but there's ways to personalize it in the font that you choose, the paper that you choose. I mean, there's subtle ways to embed your personality throughout the documents. The CV obviously should have a prioritized layout, and it will depend on what your field is, what your discipline is, and what that discipline honors or privileges. It should have a good, simple form, as Dan shared many great examples of making sure it's clean and very systematic and easy to follow, and it's appealing to the eye. You don't want people to feel worn out or overwhelmed by the text that's on the page. As the first speaker said, definitely good spelling and punctuation. It has to be perfect, because if they see one error, it is probably going to go to the bottom of the pile. There are some differing thoughts on references available on request. I guess, you just have to think about what works best for you. And then obviously the last part is your cover letter. So if you're submitting an application packet with a CV, you would obviously want to have, as a pairing of that, a cover letter that certainly identifies all of the specific skills that you possess that relate specifically to that job that you're seeking. So one item that I wanted to revisit was this prioritized layout. And in terms of seeking an education-related position in an academic arena, some of the topics or the categories are available on the screen that I wanted to highlight, and those are how I have built my own vita. So obviously at the very top is the education, the degrees you earned, and as we said, the highest seeking degree should be at the top and should work its way down. You would obviously want to have another section for additional credentials, which might be certificates or other licensures. So for example, on my vita, I have that I was certified, I have my permanent certificate in teaching K to 8. If you have a reading endorsement or a special license, then that is the area that you would want to highlight those extra credentials in. And then employment history. I mean, even on my own vita to date, I do obviously have down that I was a first grade teacher for 10 years and then all of my experiences from that point to the present. One of the big areas that I've highlighted in my curriculum vita, and that would be true of any academic, is your scholarship and your professional development history. So at the very top of my section that talks about scholarship, I have just a statement of my research focus, which is integrating technology with literacy development and teacher professional development. I have a whole section on peer-reviewed articles and publications. Then I have a section that identifies editorial reviewed publications and articles. There's a section that identifies books and monographs that I've written, book reviews, and then I even include a section that identifies publications that are currently in progress, because if I'm seeking a job, I want the employer to know what I've produced already, but certainly also what's also in process. And then there's the whole listing of presentations at local and national and international conferences, workshops in schools, and then certainly invited presentations, because you want to communicate that you're sought after, that people want to hear what you have to say about certain topics in your area of expertise. Then there's a whole section on grants, awards, and nominations. So even I list out all the grants that I have been awarded, and I also list those that have not been funded, because it again shows the employer that you've put forth the effort, even though it may have not been funded. And typically when you identify grants, you want to identify the amount, you want to identify who you're collaborating with, if there are partners in the grant, and then certainly you want to talk about what your role in the grant activity was, whether you were a consultant, whether you were a co-PI or co-principal investigator, or if you were the principal investigator. So kind of giving a very brief synopsis of what the grant was about. And then if you've been awarded any scholarly awards, academic awards, or nominations, I know a couple of my nominations that I have in my vita are early career awards in research from AERA, our American Educational Research Association, and then there was a literacy organization that I was involved in. I was also nominated for an early career award in that organization. So the nomination, of course you want the award and you want the title, but the nomination is also an achievement as well. And so someone told me that early on in my career that, even if you've been nominated, that is something to be proud of and something to detail in your curriculum vita as well. And then in education, as a professor, I do a lot of consulting with various school districts, and recently I've been involved in working a lot with the Ohio Department of Education. So I have a whole section in my vita on consulting, with professional consulting opportunities and also research-based consulting opportunities. So I'm actually just working on a project today where I collected some data at Cleveland Early College High School at John Hay, and I am actually the evaluator on an NSF grant that we're measuring and looking at multi-point video conferencing in STEM units in high school. And so there's various types of consulting that one might do, and so detailing that out is very, very important as well. And then there's other categories that I've included in my Vita, administrative duties. So there are certain projects here at CSU that I may have not had an official administrative title, but they certainly call for administrative skills. And so I'm able to identify administrative duties. For example, I was the co-director of our Community Learning Center, which is one of our centers in the College of Education. I currently serve as the program coordinator for our literacy program. In my very early years at Cleveland State, I was the director of the Cleveland Schools Book Fund, which was a collaboration between CSU and CMSD, and it was a $5 million endowed project, and so I directed that whole initiative. So if you're able to identify certain administrative activities, that will tell the employer that you have those skills and you can come into leadership roles if they're available. I've served in my current role as a faculty member on editorial boards, so reviewing articles for publication in scholarly journals. I'm currently a co-editor of one of our literacy journals, providing service to professional organizations. In my professional life, I've been the webmaster for professional organizations. I'm currently the membership director for one of our Ohio literacy-based organizations. So those are just some examples of professional service outside of the university, and then certainly service to the College of Education, involvement in committees, not only in the college but also at Cleveland State. So there's university-wide committees and college-level committees, and then involvement in graduate work with master's thesis and dissertation activities. So those are all things that we include as academics. After I go through the rest of the slides, I will pull up my Vita just to show you. But one thing I wanted to move to is also this notion of a cover letter. When you're applying for academic jobs, the Vita is important, but just as important is the process of creating a very articulate and very specified cover letter that aligns to the job that you are seeking. The cover letter provides the employer with all the information they need to see that you're just the right fit for the job. So you're trying to prove that you are the right person for that job. And when you prepare a cover letter, you do want to think about two things. One is that what does the employer really want to hear? What do they want to know? And what do I want to say about myself? And so as I mentioned, I've been on this internal search process for the last 6 weeks, and I'm currently a candidate for an associate dean position within my college. And it's really been a wonderful, reflective, professional development opportunity for me just to, again, fine-tune my own Vita, really think about all that I've done. And I had to write a fairly extensive cover letter detailing all of my requirements and I guess articulating how I met the minimum and preferred requirements, and then also how those related to the duties of the job. So, when I was preparing my cover letter, it took a lot of research. I mean, I went to the various departments and talked to lots of constituencies within our college to really learn what the position was and what the requirements were, and just so that I could think about, am I the right fit? Do I feel like I could really do this job and fit into this role? And then that was the first part. So I probably engaged in like a 2-week inquiry about what the position was. And then the second part was putting together my application materials, which were making sure my Vita was in tip-top shape, and then also writing this extensive cover letter. And it probably took me about 50 hours, and I'm not exaggerating, to write this cover letter. And I really, as Dan said, I was writing the cover letter and I had the job posting right in front of me. And the way that I approached it was that I looked at the minimum requirements and the preferred requirements, and I used those minimum and preferred requirements as subheadings within my letter. And for each of those requirements, I had a little paragraph describing the experiences that I had that would support my meeting that requirement and how I felt that I had done tasks that would relate to that requirement. And then at the very end, I circled back to the duties of the job description, and I pulled it all together and synthesized how my requirements, both minimum and preferred, really would translate into forming, to preparing myself to complete the job duties. So, and I think, from the feedback that I've gotten so far, I think being very strategic with that cover letter has been a good thing to do, because you don't want them guessing like, well, why should we hire this person? You don't want them trying to sift through all of your stuff. You want to just put it right out there, and you want it to be very clear and concise, and you want to lead the reader down that path to know that you are the right person for the job. So, and I don't know why that slide got a little messed up, but the cover letter, as Karen had mentioned, it should be structured with an intro. So at the very beginning, you should affirm the position and express your desired interest in the position. The middle part was really where I highlighted my minimum requirements, preferred requirements, of how I met those with specific details of things that I had accomplished over the last 9 years of being at CSU, and that's the chunk of the letter that is most meaty and most dense, and it really should highlight the skills and experience related to those requirements, and then at the very end tie back into the job duties. And then closing, of course, you want to end positively and re-express your interest, etc. So at the very end, I will show you just a glimpse of my cover letter and my vita. But I think one thing to end on is that you need to proofread, proofread, proofread. I can't tell you how many times my husband heard that cover letter over and over and over. And just reading it out loud to yourself really helps, because sometimes when you read it silently, you don't hear the way it sounds. So reading out loud is very, very important, and proofing it over and over and over. And as I said, just doing a little bit of research and personal inquiry about the job is critical, because it shows that you're really interested, that you've done some research, that you're really invested. And then I had just a lot of, as I was meeting different people throughout my inquiry process for the job, I was writing down notes, making checklists for myself, so I wouldn't forget any nuggets that I wanted to put into my letter. And then certainly tailoring it to a specific job. And then as far as the vita, just making sure that you revise and update it very, very regularly is just really key. So I won't take much time here, but I did want to show you, and I think Patty is going to put our files on the graduate resource homepage, but this is what my vita looks like, and I'll just give you a glimpse. I'm not going to go through page by page, obviously. We'll just try to maximize that just a little bit. Oh, maybe not, but it's not allowing me to make it larger, but you get the idea. I mean, it looks pretty neat. There's bolding, as Dan said, that's the top of it, and you'll have it available to take a look at. I don't want to take more time than we really need to, but again, it's very spaced out well. There's bolding when there needs to be, pages. I don't have the date at the bottom, so that was a good tip that I learned today. So you can certainly take a closer look when it's on the resource page. And then this was my letter of interest, and I just wanted to show you in the body, you can see that I've, done an intro. I've said I've carefully examined this opportunity and have every confidence that I possess the enthusiasm, initiative, technical skills, and personal disposition. So you're just trying to express that you're really interested in the position. And then the following paragraphs have like an italicized, bolded heading. So one of the minimum requirements that you were a tenured faculty member. So I gave a little bit of narrative about how I was tenured. Excellent writing skills. There's examples of why I feel that I have excellent writing skills, strong research skills. So you can see, and I've highlighted actual research projects that I've engaged in, and this was about an 8-page letter. So for each of those minimum and preferreds, I've given a very narrative accounting of what I've done to make it very easy for the employer to consider. And then at the very end, I've circled back to the duties. And then finally, and this is something else that will be on your resource page, these are just some resources that I've found about creating of CV, resumes, cover letters, what not to do, as well as the other resources. And then my last point that I wanted to show you, and you probably really can't see this, but I think, most job searches today are requiring materials to be submitted electronically. But I think, when you get to the actual interview stage, I think it is also a really good idea to present them with a hard copy of your application, your CV, your letter. And so one thing that I did, and I'll just stand up and show you real quick, I really am I think how you package materials in hard copy format says a lot too. So for my recent job search, for everybody on the search committee and for everybody that I met in groups of small, interview committees that actually conducted a formal interview, I handed out one of these. And this is just a bound booklet that I had made at Kinko's, and it's tabbed with the letter of interest, my references, my curriculum vitae. It has a front and back cover. And I just think it goes a long way to show that you take the job seriously. It allows them to have a nice hard copy that they can reference as they're visiting with you in that face-to-face interview. So I wanted to share that as well as a final tip. So I hope that's been helpful in some way.
Thank you, Dr.
Oh, sure. I can trade with you.
No, you can just leave it.
Oh,
Just open
sure.
it, it's fine.
Okay.
That should be easy enough.
Best wishes on your search too.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Your information's definitely fresh, isn't it?
Hopefully I'll find out later this
Any more?
week.
That's okay, I'm pretty loud anyway.
No, that's it.
That's fine, that's fine. So I think there have been 2 take-home messages presented so far. It should be pretty clear by now. And that is, there can be no mistakes, right? Nobody wants to see a sloppy anything. There can be no mistakes in your CV. And also that the CV is very discipline specific, all right? And I was really happy to see that we had a broad range of people on this panel, because I think the most important thing you can know is what it is that your employer expects to see and what they don't want to see. And that is going to be very discipline specific. And so what I did was I tailored my presentation to the student who is a doctoral student, could also be a master's student, but it's tailored very specifically for the transition from a doctoral student to a postdoctoral fellow, because in my discipline, that is the next step that's going to happen. My CV is 18 pages long, right? Because I've been doing this for a while. But a doctoral student CV will be 1 page long if you're lucky, okay? And then, so as we go through my presentation, there's the next step is from a postdoc to a faculty position, or what we like to call a real job. And once you get that real job, that's when the CV grows into 18 pages as you then apply for chair or associate dean or whatever. But my presentation is going from getting your PhD to the very next job, which for all intents and purposes, specifically in the sciences, 9.9 times out of 10 is going to be a postdoctoral position, all right? And I handed out, you all have the CV, it's 1 page. Right, I actually changed the format a little bit so that I could get it on 1 page, so that I didn't have 1 sentence on the second page. And so what you can see, and this has been, some of this is going to be redundant, but if you hear things more than once, it must be absolutely correct. So again, there are variations. They don't all look the same. I have 20 CVs. When I was first starting out, I used to collect CVs. So that I could see how to do it. And there's lots of different ways to do it, but there's a few things that are going to be common among all of them. And every one of us has started off with some sort of an address, all right? And education. Now in my particular discipline, it's not the end of the world if you do it a different way, but in my particular discipline, we actually do the reverse. We like to see you grow from a BS to a PhD. So we don't put the final degree last, but again, if you do, no one's really going to care. And so what you can see here is, as Dan was talking about, figuring out a way to put your GPA in there without being kind of gross and putting the actual number, is that you can put something like summa cum laude. Then people know exactly what your GPA was, at least that or above, right? So there are ways to kind of work it in there without kind of looking like you're bragging about it. But people do care. People want to know that you got good grades. It's a function both of your intelligence, but also your work ethic. I know a lot of smart people, very high IQs, terrible GPAs. Why? They don't have a good work ethic, right? So a good GPA is important, and there are ways to sort of work it into your CV without actually putting a number in there. And then you can see the PhD, and again, you put the dissertation title in there because for this particular position, you're not going through human resources. This particular position, you're going through an individual. I am actually the person that will hire you into my lab to work for me as a postdoctoral fellow. I alone make that decision. All right, so this is a very personal kind of relationship between you and the person you're going to be working for next. All right, so again, because this is a postdoctoral position, the things that I care about the most, I am the hiring manager in this position, are your peer-reviewed publications. All right, if you were moving from a postdoc to a faculty position, you would want to research that faculty position and figure out, is it predominantly research, in which case you put your publications first and your funding first? Or is it predominantly teaching, in which case you put your teaching first? So you always have to tailor your CV to the exact job that you're looking for. But again, in the hard sciences, nobody moves from a PhD to a faculty position. It does not happen. It hasn't happened for 30 years. Your next job will be a postdoctoral fellow, in which case the only thing I care about is whether or not you can do research. And the primary indicator of whether or not you're good at the bench and you can do research are your peer-reviewed publications. So what I've handed you is actually an ideal application. There won't be many that are as good as the CV that I just handed you, okay? So please don't feel like if yours doesn't look like that, it's not a good CV. That one, that is the best of all possible worlds, where you'll have, here we have 3 first author publications. Again, in my discipline, the first author is the most significant author. But you may have 2 first author publications and a middle author publication, all right? But if you can have 2 to 3 publications during your dissertation, you're doing well. Some people will have more, that's great, but 2 to 3, especially if they're first author and especially if they're in very good high impact factor journals. As a matter of fact, we'd rather see 1 or 2 or 3 in good journals than 4 or 5 or 6 in less good journals, all right? So again, and if you have a work in progress, that's fine. You can put that on here as well. As I said, you can also include the manuscript in preparation. These are essentially equivalent to abstracts. If you only have 1 publication, you can put abstracts on there, but typically abstracts just turn into papers. So I would only include the abstracts if you only have 1 or 2 publications and you sort of want to show where, and in fact, I'd probably turn the abstracts into manuscript in preparation, all right? Because an abstract, if there's no hope of it getting published, it's not very useful. All right, and then this is the section that I did not put on the thing that I handed out to you, because this would actually be your next move, moving from a postdoc to an actual faculty position. When you would move from your postdoc to your faculty position, you have to add another section, and that section I refer to as research position. I'm going to take this off. No, probably not. All right. That section I refer to as research positions, and in this case, I did 2 of them, so they're both on there. I think it's important to include the advisor, because typically you don't move too far out of your field, and so the more famous the advisor you work for, the more likely it is that they're going to be recognized. And so who you work for becomes very important, almost as important as the publications that you have. Okay, back to if you're just a student, which is what you guys are now, which is, by the way, it's a great time, all right? Enjoy this. It just gets worse, all right? So if you're a student, you should have some publications on your CV, and you should try to get some external funding, or even internal funding. There are pre-doctoral grants available, and this particular individual got one, and it's quite wonderful and quite impressive. But there are also internal awards from Cleveland State, so you should consider applying for those. What this shows is that you've taken the initiative to actually write a grant, because again, you want to know, you want to understand the job for which you are applying and present those skills to the employer. And in this case, the job for which you are applying is a bench scientist. Can you do research, and Can you write grants to get money to do your research? So these are the two skills that come first on the CV, your publications and your external funding. The other category that you've heard everyone talk about so far are honors and awards. There are some fellowships that we have available here. There's some other kind of best poster awards that you can win. It's nice if you've got a couple of these. It's not a big deal if you don't, but if you have them, put them on there and get recognition for them. The teaching experience this will become more important as you move from the postdoc to the faculty position. And again, if this were a faculty position that was predominantly focused on teaching, this would have been the first thing, not the peer-reviewed publication. So again, you always have to tailor the CV, as everyone has said, to the exact job position that you are trying to get. But again, teaching experience, what it does in this particular case is it shows your work ethic, because in addition to writing those grants and doing all of that research, you did all that while you had another full-time job called teaching assistant, all right? So it shows your ability to multitask. And the other thing that we require actually of our doctoral students is that they give 2 lectures. So I put that on there as well. This is something that our very best students would actually have leaving here. And again, this feeds right into the next category, which is mentoring experience. Okay, the number one thing that I or anybody like me would be looking for in a postdoc is can you generate data, right? And that you show through your research publications. Can you write a grant to maybe support your own research so I don't have to do it, because that takes a little bit of pressure off of me, right? So that funding is important. But the other thing that I look for, and my students get a chance to do, is I look for your ability to mentor. Because as a postdoc in my lab, I'm going to look to you to help train the doctoral students, just like I look to the doctoral students to help train the undergraduate students. And so it serves several purposes. It helps me, because I have less work to do, but it also helps you because you get mentoring experience. The other thing that I found to be very true is that nobody can mentor you as well as the person in the position just above you, right? So undergraduates are best mentored by doctoral students. Why? Because the doctoral student is the very next step above them. And it's still, the doctoral student can still remember when they didn't know anything. I've sort of forgot, I'm kind of old, and I just don't really remember that much what it was like to be an undergraduate anymore, right? So my doctoral students do a much better job. And I'll come in and I'll talk to the undergraduates and their eyes will glaze over, and the doctoral student will say, what she's really trying to say is, and the same is true for postdocs, right? So again, in the sciences, it's very much this, pyramid scheme. And so as somebody who does hire postdocs, I like to see that they have some mentoring experience, because I would like to know that they're going to be able to help me with my doctoral students. And so that's why listing and taking on the opportunity to mentor students is very important. And then I did put service on here. Again, I don't really want you running off doing a lot of other things. I want you at the bench generating data for me, helping me train my students, getting grants. But there's no harm in being a community, a good citizen and doing a little bit of service. Now, again, this is very specific to the sciences. This is why I say, whichever one of us is closest to your discipline, that's the person who you should really pay attention to, because that person knows that community and knows what people in that community are expecting to see. I know the biomedical chemistry science industry, and I know what people who hire postdocs are looking for. These people each have their own area of expertise, and you should definitely listen to them, because every discipline is very, very different. And when you become a faculty member, this service category gets huge, because again, doing service and being a good citizen is a large part of being a faculty member. It is not a large part of being a postdoctoral fellow. All right? So as you move through this world, the expectations of what your job is, they're going to change and they're going to get larger. But again, I tried to focus my presentation on where you actually are right now. And you're still in a very focused zone for the most part. And so then the references, as Dan said, make sure you get permission ahead of time. It happens to me too. It's like, so-and-so said you'd provide a letter of recommendation. And if I'm really awake, I can sort of fake it and say, oh, yes, absolutely, I knew all about it. And then I call them up, and why didn't you tell me you applied for this job? I could have been better prepared. I tend to like to list them only because science can be a very small world. And if you can list some very famous scientists who are willing to give you references, well, I'm kind of impressed by that, and you might move a little higher up until I hear what they have to say, of course. No, I'm just kidding. But you might move a little higher up on that stack. All right. So again, but this is sort of specific to this, probably the scientific. I don't know. It could be true in other disciplines too. If there are very famous people that are willing to give you a letter of recommendation, it might be worth putting them on there. So then the final thing is the cover letter or email. And again, this is a very focused, you're not going through the human resources department. Everything everybody said about their cover letter is absolutely correct for a real job, if you will, right? But this next step, this postdoctoral position, it's still a training position. It's a mentor-mentee kind of position. I'm fine with an email. I get about 1 a week from people wanting to do postdocs in my laboratory. I have no problem if it's an email as opposed to an actual hardcover. I have no problem if it's literally in the body of the email as opposed to an attachment, all right? What I do care about are 2 things. I don't want any grammar problems, all right? And everybody has an ego, and so you should know something about the actual person to whom you're sending the email. It's very clear to all of us when you've written a blanket email and just change the name of the professor that you're sending it to. And the minute I see that, gone, I don't even look at it, right? You have to take the time to really know what's going on in that person's lab. And so you start off by stroking their ego just a little bit, not too much. They shouldn't know you're stroking their ego, right? But the point is that you went to the trouble to read their most recent papers, all right? And maybe you've thought about the work that's going on in their lab and have some ideas. It actually shows your excitement and interest in their particular research topic. So you want to put a few little things in there, that you've read their stuff, that you have some thoughts on what might happen next. And then you want to say, obviously I'm writing to inquire about a position. It doesn't matter so much if you say that first or last, but in my humble opinion, if you kind of get me all excited because you're excited about what I'm doing, when I get to that last sentence, I'm already in a good mood, right? You've already made me happy that you're interested in my work. So I tend to want to put that after a little bit of, I've read your stuff, it's very exciting. You'll also notice that it's not very long. Okay, in this particular, I'm a very busy person. Everybody like me is a very busy person. There are no minimums or preferreds or anything like that. I want you to work at the bench really, really hard, right? That's it. So very short, because I'm not going to read anything that's more than 5 sentences long. But again, this is very focused to this next step. When you write for a faculty position, these letters tend to get longer, but not too much longer, because again, I've served on search committees with 300 applications. I don't really want to read more than a paragraph or 2, right? What I care about is your CV. How many publications did you have? How much teaching experience do you have? So that's all I had to say. But I just want to reiterate, the 2 most important things: be neat, don't make mistakes, proofread. But know what it is that your employer wants. Know what that discipline expects to see in the shape of the CV or the cover letter. You have to give people what they're expecting to see, or they're going to think that you don't actually understand the discipline itself. All right? I think that's it. I guess we're open to questions now. Thank you for listening.
Panelists in a number of different areas here. They've done a fantastic job in putting together a presentation for you. This has all been unrehearsed. I commend them on their 15-minute time frame. I know it's very difficult. If you've heard nothing else, you've heard about the importance of the details in your specific curriculum vitae, and I think they've all done a good job in covering that. So I'm very thankful, and the College of Graduate Studies is thankful to them. We do have just a short time for a question or 2 from any of you, so we'll start in the back, and we will ask you to use the microphone because we're taping the session. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. First of all, where would you put graduate assistantship? Would you put that under funding or would you put that under awards?
Was it a teaching assistantship or a sorry.
It was primarily teaching.
So that will be apparent under the teaching experience. That'll
Okay.
be, so so right there you can see I had the teaching experience, teaching assistant for those particular courses. That's where I would put it.
Okay, because like I have a lot of teaching experience. I have about 6-7 years of teaching experience being my own instructor. But I don't have anything under awards or funding, so I'm wondering if that would
And
work.
so you bring up a good point, and that is trying to make sure you fill a lot of the different categories. And so I probably wouldn't, in that case, I probably wouldn't put it under funding because you didn't actually write a grant proposal, but it's an award. You could put it under honors and awards.
All right, that's one of my questions. The second question is, I was always under the impression that a cover letter should be 1 page. Is that, I mean, like the resume, that it should be 1 page, a cover letter should be 1 page, just here I am kind of thing. Can you speak to that as to whether that's true?
I think if you're using a resume and applying for a position with a cover letter, we try to emphasize 1 page, but I think this is where some of the panelists have talked about talking to professors and professionals in the field, because the standards could be very different. For instance, with Dr. Still applying for the Associate Dean position, I don't think that would be possible to do that in a 1-page cover letter. So if you were to seek out this information, it could be really helpful. And if you're looking for contact people in the area to help you, just off topic, how many of you have LinkedIn profiles? This is an incredible resource for you, and even if you were to look under the alumni tab, there are over 58,000 Cleveland State alumni in LinkedIn, so you can also do a very specific type of search in terms of what type of industry, what type of position, and these could be additional resources for you outside of your immediate CSU family.
So if I could just add to that, I would say when there are minimums and preferred, you should address those very clearly in the cover letter, because I've been on search committees where we have those things too. There are 4 minimums and 5 preferreds, and I have a spreadsheet that I have to fill out. Does she meet it? Does she meet it? Does she meet it? Okay? And you make my life a lot easier if you just tell me. Now, I'm not going to trust you 100%. I'm going to go look in your CV, but you will make my job a lot easier, and I'll be in a much better mood if you sort of spell out for me in the cover letter how you meet the minimums and the preferreds, even if it takes 2 or 3 pages to do so.
In the back, yeah.
So I have a question for Dr. Wayman. So being a teaching assistant, and if you are a TA for a laboratory course, is it more valuable than being a TA for a theoretical course or vice versa? Is there a preference for it or not so much?
I don't think it matters either way. I think both of them speak to your ability to be in front of a group of people and organize your thoughts and communicate. So I don't think it matters one way or the other. Luckily, in our discipline, in our department, you get both, because the teaching assistantship is to run the labs, but a requirement of the doctoral degree is to give 2 lectures. So you don't have a choice actually in our program. You will have both of those things on your CV.
And we had a question here in the front, I think.
My question is, I'm a non-traditional student. I'm returning back to school after 10 years. So none of the professors in the psychology department are there. And I'm only here for this semester that we're currently in, so I haven't had a chance to really make any connections with any of my professors like I did when I was here 10 years ago and did my whole 3.5 years. So I want to apply for graduate school, and I just don't know what avenues to really go through to do that, because I haven't been here. So any recommendations I would ask, I guess, is my question.
I do have, of course, I always have something to say. That's, anyone who knows me knows I'm never at a loss for words. I would say, I don't know what particular, there are a lot of psychology, there are a lot of graduate programs in psychology. I would find out who the graduate program director is for your particular area of interest, and I would make an appointment with them, and I would meet them. And that'll give you a chance to make an impression on them, and they may be the primary, or at least a very important person in making a decision as to whether or not you get in the program.
Because the other thing is I haven't like had any research experience because, or anything like that, which is, I know when you go from your bachelor's into your master's, you want some type of research or something up under your belt. I don't have any.
I didn't either.
Okay.
So it's okay. It's helpful if as an undergraduate you had that opportunity, but not everybody has had that opportunity. What they're looking for is an intelligent individual who can look a person in the eye and have a conversation with them. And so that's why I think it would be important for you to have a meeting with the graduate program director so that they could see who you are and get a feel for who you are. Anybody can be taught how to do research. As a matter of fact, an undergraduate research experience isn't very much. It's a very short thing. The only thing it really does is it gives you an idea as if you really want to do research or not. You really don't pick up very many skills from doing that. It'll give you an indication, do I want to do more of that? So while it's always a good thing, it's not an absolute requirement in any way, shape, or form, because you will be taught how to be a researcher in that graduate program. Okay, that's fine. You've got the floor, so you might as well go with it.
Well, because I missed the deadline for graduate school for coming up in the fall, what my idea was to do was to or try to get with somebody over the next year before the application is due again, and maybe like just volunteer my time with them. Would that be something that you would recommend or that you would do? I mean, that would be okay?
Yes, it would be something that I would, it's not an easy thing to achieve, what you just said. And so that is, again, where you would want to probably meet with the graduate program director and see if they could guide you. They may have some idea what faculty member might have an opening. It's very hard to do a cold email to the faculty, sort of saying, honestly, I get these all the time. I want to volunteer. I can't handle, it's just too many. But if they come and see me and I get a feel for them, I develop a relationship with them, I'm much more likely to say yes.
And I think we have time for one more question.
As a part of the application for faculty positions, some universities require a teaching philosophy and some don't. If they don't require it, would you recommend incorporating it into the cover letter or always send it as a separate document? Or does that say anything about that the institution maybe doesn't care much about the teaching, so we shouldn't talk about it at all?
I don't mean to monopolize the
No,
mic.
I mean, my first instinct is that I think I would just provide whatever they're asking for and no more. Because, I don't know, I think it's just really important to follow the directions and show that you're able to do that. And then I'm sure that they'll, if you were invited then for a campus visit, I'm sure there'd be an opportunity for you to display your philosophy. Maybe you might have to do a teaching demonstration, and certainly your philosophy would come out within that face-to-face display. I just wouldn't, I guess, bombard them with additional information.
Yeah, I would
I guess
concur.
my
I wasn't sure
thought.
what I was going to say, but listening to you, I think that she's absolutely correct. We have an issue when people can't follow directions. All right, so if
Right.
we ask for 3 letters of recommendation and we get 6, it's like, can you not read? So I think it is very important to
think so.
actually do exactly what they tell you to do.
And do it very well. Whatever you're doing, do it very, very well, but don't overdo it. Like, don't give them more information than what they're seeking.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally, I'd just like to say that some of you may have additional questions, and I apologize if we can't get to all of them. I think I'd just like to reiterate the advice that you were given. Your program directors are experts in what they're looking for. I would certainly urge you to speak with your program directors for your specific area. I'm betting that many of our panelists here would be willing to take questions as well from you by email, but I would think that your program directors might help you most specifically. So just so that you know, one final reminder, all the materials that you've seen today and that were in the hallway as handouts will be added to our website. You can grab a business card on the way out there on the table with the green tablecloth outside the door. They will get you to the Graduate Student Resource Center website, and you can get all the information that you need there. Thank you for your time and your patience with our technical issues today, and we hope that you had a good experience, and best wishes with finals.
Thank you.